I'm going to give you about 1 more minute. Remember the reasons why. That's really important. Okay, about 30 seconds. Okay, so when you were doing this, there was no right or wrong answer. All four are leaves, all four are different. The Finnish assessment system really likes to look at multiple ways to solve a problem. And that goes from preschool through university level. They always like to think that there's multiple ways to approach something. Now, I was looking through the chat at the leaves and some of the reasons, and they're all valid. They're all correct. And hopefully those of you that are with other people and were able to talk with people, notice that same exact thing. Now, qualitative, quantitative. With this, you could actually do both. How? Well, you could quantify which leaf was chosen the most. What were the reasons why? Which one was chosen the least? What are the reasons why? Well, the qualitative, then you can delve into those more. Well, is it a color thing? Is it this? Is it that? You have multiple opportunities to approach this. And that's largely how Finnish education views their assessment system. Multiple ways to approach it, and they're using both qualitative and quantitative. This was a simple exercise with 4 leaves that I found outside on my balcony. Put them on the balcony floor and just took a picture. That simple. Now, would it be more involved? Of course it would. Of course it would. This was just like a mere example. And the quantitative and the qualitative, of course, they would be much more involved than what I gave you. So originally, Dr. Larby was talking about phenomena-based learning and STEAM. And I'm going to approach this through more phenomena-based learning because they use STEAM a lot of in the same way. There's an authentic real-world phenomena. There's a trigger. That trigger can be organic, where it's initiated by the students, or it can be traditional, where the teachers plan everything. And I've got a couple videos that will show, one where it was student initiated and 2 where it was teacher planned. The videos are in Finnish with Chinese subtitles. However, before each video, I will tell you a little bit about each one. So even if you don't have any Finnish or any Chinese, you can watch it and kind of understand what's going on. It integrates different subjects. The learning is very deep with a holistic understanding. The student is at the center of everything. Team learning is implemented throughout, and it's oriented towards goals. So this first one is an organic trigger. It's the honey project. A school principal was approached by some students asking about the bees outside of his window. In Finland, the principal or the head of the school has the door open almost all the time, unless they're in a meeting. Teachers are free to drop in, parents are free to drop in, students are free to drop in. And it's very different than the US. When I was there in the US, the door was usually closed and students were only usually going there as a punishment. So it's a very different mindset here, and I think it's much healthier. You know, the principal is seen as more of an ally for everybody. So I'll go ahead and start this video. Okay, so what she's saying so far is this is a French school in Helsinki. So it's a group of fourth class students, and they make their own honey, and it was over 30 liters. So I'm going to just go ahead and let it go now. Are other people having a tough time hearing the video as well? Please put it in the chat, because I see one person cannot hear it. Because I am hearing it. No sound, no voice. Okay. I don't know why the voice is not working. I tried it out earlier and it was working. Let me try now. Is that better? Let me know if it's better.
Nämä on näitä paloja niistä mehiläisten pesään tulevista jutuista. Sitten kun tää on valmista, sitten tulee niiden mehiläisten sellainen, mihin sitä hunajaa syntyy.
Kuvaamataidossa koululaiset suunnittelevat purkeilleen etikettejä. Mehiläisiin ja hunajaan liittyvä opetus tapahtuu ranskan kielellä ja ranskan kielisten opettajien kanssa.
Kaikilta luokilta arvotaan niinku yksi etiketti. Niin meillä sanottiin, että pitää lukea, että se on meidän koulun eli Helsingin ranskalais-suomalaisen koulun hunajaa, ja sit se ainakin mulla lukee myös ranskaksi.
What they were doing there is they had to make advertisements for their project because they're going to sell this honey. And you know, by advertising, they're learning many skills there. And even though this was a phenomena-based learning, you can see how there's so many elements of STEAM involved in it as well. Earlier in the video, you saw how they had experts coming in and showing them how to extract the honey and a bunch of other things as well.
meillä sanottiin, että pitää lukea, että se on meidän koulun eli Helsingin ranskalais-suomalaisen koulun hunajaa ja sit se ainakin mulla lukee myös ranskaksi.
Helsingin ranskalais-suomalaisessa koulussa hunajaa valmistetaan nyt jo toisena vuotena peräkkäin. Valmis hunaja myydään ja tuloilla rahoitetaan mehiläistarhauksen jatkoa myös tulevina vuosina.
No siinä näkee, että miten ne mehiläiset tekee sitä työtä ja sitten siinä näkee myös, että miten se luonnollinen hunaja sitten oikeasti tehdään kaikki, otetaan pois noista ja silleen.
Okay, so that was the video from that school. They made this a yearly project after this, and it was all from students talking with the principal who got the teacher involved, and then they worked on it. But the original trigger came from students. So an organic trigger can be very powerful. And you also got to hear a bit of Finnish there. And so the next video I have is a traditional trigger. The students wanted to know, the teacher set it up because it's very cold in Finland in winter. So how deep do fish swim in winter? And basically what they learned is they're at the very bottom because there's a layer of warm water down there. And they brought experts in, they were ice fishing, they were measuring the temperature of the water at different depths. They were learning how to use all these different instruments. And this also was in Finnish with the Chinese subtitles. So I won't stop it this time, I'll just let it go. So just try to look what's going on and what's happening. And you can see how either trigger is beneficial and works.
Meidän ryhmäämme kuuluu Marko, Venla, Emmi ja Markus. Tutkimusongelmamme on, kuinka syvällä kalat uivat talvella. Tutkijan näkökulma on biologi.
Finfood-sivustolta saimme tietoa, että kalat uivat talvella pohjassa, sillä siellä on lämmintä vettä.
So online research.
Saimme tietoa myös 5. luokan fysiikan ja kemian kirjasta. Siellä kerrottiin, että syvällä pohjassa vesi on +4
So
asteista.
physics and chemistry were involved.
Sakari Törmälä vastasi kysymyksiimme. Hänen mukaansa mitä lämpimämpää vesi on, sitä nopeammin kalat uivat, mutta eri lajit uivat silti eri vauhdilla eri lämpöisessä vedessä. Juha Jurvelius vastasi samalla lailla ja antoi myös esimerkin, että vaeltaessaan Saimaan järvilohi uisi parissa päivässä Savon rannalta Sulkavalle. Olemme mitanneet veden syvyyttä kaikuluotaimella. Kuitenkin epäilemme, että pitääkö se paikkansa, sillä kun mittasimme narulla, niin se antoi toisenlaisia mittaustuloksia. Seuraavassa videossa mittaamme veden syvyyttä kaikuluotaimella ja yritämme selvittää, missä kalat
So we're
uivat.
looking for fish and doing water temperature.
Tässä on kaikuluotain. Tämä mittaa se veden syvyyden ja ehkä kalojakin näkyy. Ja tuossa se taitoja.
Se näyttö.
Niin.
Marko laittaa tänne veteen.
So they're also learning how to use all the equipment as well, if you notice.
Tätä 7,2, 7,1.
70.
7.
Tuolla on
And
kaloja.
you can see in the fish finder, they're finding some fish.
Kokeillaan piilkkiä samalla siitä reiästä, että saattaa olla piilkkiä.
And the pilki is the ice fishing rod.
Me vähän epäillään kyllä tätä, että pitääkö tää paikkaa sitä kaikuluota.
Näkyykö kaloja?
Ja me tässä ongitaan, tää on ihan tylsää, jos ei tuu kala.
Niin, vaikka tuo kyllä näyttää, että olisi kaloja, mutta ei kyllä siltä tunnu täällä. Että...
Niin, mutta äsken meillä ainakin nyki. Mut sitten... Emmi keksi tommosen jutun, että se laittoi tuohon kiinni, sit kun nykiin, niin otetaan se siitä ja laitetaan.
Terveystarkastaja Tiina Monk kävi koulullamme. Hänen kanssaan mittasimme veden lämpötilaa. 1 metrin päästä pinnasta lämpötila oli plus 0,6, välikerroksen lämpötila oli plus 0,7, 1 metrin päästä pohjasta lämpötila oli plus 2,2.
So measuring the water temperature at different depths.
Tässä kuvassa mittasimme veden lämpötilaa. Kaiken kaikkiaan on tutkimusaineistoa, itse ottamia kuvia 62 kappaletta, videota 24 kappaletta, piirroksia 3 kappaletta ja kirjoja 1. Tutkimuksemme mukaan kalat uivat talvella pohjassa, koska siellä on lämpimintä vettä. Ne ovat vaihtolämpöisiä eläimiä ja ne eivät paljon liiku talvella.
So the fish are finding where it's warm, but they're not very active.
Talvella jään alla pinnassa on kylmintä vettä. Pohjassa vesi on plus 4 asteista. Kalat uivat pohjassa, sillä siellä vesi on lämmin.
So they're swimming near the bottom because it's where it's warmest. And this is autumn and spring.
Syksyllä ja keväällä pintavesi kylmenee ja lämpenee plus 4 asteiseksi. Silloin vesi on kaikkein painavinta, joten se painuu pohjaan ja pohjavesi sekoittuu muuhun veteen. Näin syntyy veden kiertokulku. Happi painuu pohjaan. Tämä on hyvin tärkeää.
So where they're at, the temperature is fairly constant during those seasons.
Kesällä pintavesi on lämpimintä ja pohjavesi
And they
on
learned in
viileää.
summer that it's warmer on the top and colder below. So this group of students, they learned so much during this, just like with the bees. But this one, the teacher set everything up, and the teacher had the trigger, and the teacher had the idea to move everything forward. So either way, it works. You know, if the students come up with something, no matter what age, it's good to listen, because if they're interested, they're going to work really hard on finding their answers. And one thing is, it was done as a team. I hope you notice that in everything. I have this short video, and this is from a workshop that I did in Beijing in 2017, I believe it was. And they're brainstorming what they need to do. Each team was given an A4 sheet of paper, a paper clip, and 20 centimeters of painter's tape. What they had to do is they had to build a freestanding tower. There was a rubric partially filled in. And the reason it was partially filled in is if it's filled all the way in, they don't have ownership over how they're assessed. And I did the same thing with children, no matter what age. Even 3-year-olds can put some things in. Their assessments are, of course, not what it would be with adults or university students or other teachers, but they do have things they can put in. I had it about half full. I had 5 criteria for this, one of them being how tall the tower would be, but I didn't have any of them filled all the way in. And one of the really important things, and why I really wanted to show this video, is they're all speaking Chinese, and that's okay. I didn't have to understand what they were doing because I'm not a part of their team. I'm looking at what is their teamwork like? How are they working together? Is one person being dominant? Are they listening and working together? And just kind of staying back and observing this. I was at a middle school at Tianjin, and the students were doing this. And then suddenly I had the director come and ask if he could do it as well, or if he could join a student team. And I told him, well, if you can find a team where they'll let you in, but you cannot be the leader. You have to listen more than you speak. Yes. And a group of students let him join. And afterwards, he told me it was the hardest thing he had done in 30 years because he wanted to take over. He thought he had this idea and he put it out there. The students listened, but they wanted to continue going the way they were going because they liked their idea. And it wasn't that his idea was wrong. It was just different. It wasn't what the group of students wanted to do. And as soon as the director joined, teachers started forming groups together. And it was really quite ironic that a team of students without the director had the tallest tower. The goal is to make it a meter or more. Every team got at least 80 centimeters tall, freestanding, not taped to the table, not leaning against anything. So in that way, they were all a success and they all worked together. And so when we look at phenomenon-based learning, or even STEAM, start with the trigger, prior knowledge, and then go through this whole process here. There's a competence goal. What do you want them to learn? And as you look here, there's assignments, there's tasks, guidance and feedback, learning material, teaching. There's all kinds of things involved, but the phenomena is what encircles everything. And again, bring in experts, because as a teacher, you're not the expert on everything. They can be via Zoom, Teams, different online meeting system, or they can be in person, whatever works for you and your situation. This is one. This one, Sisko Malalan, she is a retired teacher that used to teach at one of the universities in Finland, and she gave me permission to use this. Hers is a little bit different. You plan the phenomenon. So hers is that very traditional teacher plans it rather than the organic student initiated. There's an orientation with the brainstorming or the first group meeting where the trigger is. Independent and collaborative work. And then you finish it up, student presentations, feedback discussion, peer feedback. But you notice here, there's a student learning journal, there's experts, at least 2 times you're meeting with an expert, reflection, comments, feedback. So 2 different models that you can use for either phenomenon-based learning, STEAM, or with other things in your classroom too. I mean, I just think that they're both very solid. Here's an example of a student learning journal. And for me, there's 2 things on this that are the most important things. And this is one that I've used, that I put several different ones, the ideas together. The first thing that is most important to me is this here, the illustration to trigger your memories. People learn in different ways. And even if you say, I can't draw, I can't draw, I can't draw, make an illustration still, because it can't be online. It needs to be like with a pencil or pen, a hard stylus. And the reason for that is it imprints better in your brain if you have the hard stylus when you're writing or you're drawing something. All the research has shown that really imprints in your brain better, and it makes it easier to recall. And then here, what will you put into practice? So what part of your learning will you put into practice? Maybe it's something as simple as, I learned that if I talk less and listen more, I understand others better. It's a process. You basically do your student learning journal almost every day. And it's not something that's a quick fix. You're going from the beginning to end of this project. And what's fun to do is you start at the beginning of the year, whether it's university students or younger. And after the project, you look through these as a team and you talk about them. And at the end of the year, you look through all of them and you talk about them kind of as a small group and big group. And it shows how you have grown as a person and as a student, and as how your peers have grown as well. And when I was a teacher, I did a teacher learning journal every day as well. And then I would share it with students after each project, because I think it's important to model. And my thing is, I don't believe you should ask students to do something you're not willing to do yourself. So I really try to model that behavior. And really, any education facility is a phenomenon. I mean, look at all these things: architects, engineers, construction workers, interior designers, electricians, ICT technicians, publishers, educators, custodial staff, students. No group works alone. Everything is all interconnected. So it's not hard to find a trigger. They're everywhere. So here was the tower building project I was telling you about. And these are the same teams you were seeing in the early video. These are some of their finished products. A couple of them did tape it to the table because it kept falling over, but it wasn't a failure. What they learned was, okay, we need to do something to help the bottom of the tower stand better. But look at the faces. Look at their sense of accomplishment. It's standing. They're so happy. And I have a photo from each team from that. I mean, you can see this one's much shorter. Look at this one. Look at some of the ideas that were involved with this. And even this one, it's much shorter. Look at that sense of accomplishment. And then this team, it kept falling over and falling over and falling over. As you can see here, she's holding it up. They had the tallest tower. It was over 1.5 meters tall. But if you notice here, they taped it to the table. That's how they solved the problem. And in the debrief afterwards, they said if they would have had longer legs and maybe a ring around their legs at the bottom going up a little bit, that they think they could have made it even taller, possibly. So they were already thinking of how to do this on their own. And I got feedback from this group of teachers, and they did this with their students. And they said that it was just amazing watching their students build this and go through the exact same processes that they did. And please just remember, the human memory is not a scanner. We don't have a hard disk in our head. There's, context is king. Constructive nature of human memory is super important. There's differences between novices and experts, but we're all experts in something and we're all novices in something. That's why it's really important to work with others. And people by nature are active and very creative learners. Do we all learn the same way? No. And that's one of our strengths. We help each other through the process. And details are learned more effectively in ways that are meaningful. So there's my references. And I would really like to thank you for going through that. I tried to stay in my allotted time, and it looks like I did a quite decent job. I was told I had about 45 minutes. So I was trying to finish about 3. So now I was told by Dr. Larby that there could be some questions and answers on that. And like I said, I went through things fairly quickly, but I will send him a PDF of this, and then he can disseminate it to people from there. And there's no problems with that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tom, for such a wonderful presentation on phenomenon-based learning. Going through this course and teaching my students based on this framework, we also came out with a lot of activities that help students to improve their, engagement, collaboration, and critical thinking skills. And I believe they have thousands of questions to ask you, Tom, based on how Finland is able to apply this phenomenon-based learning in their basic education, how they assess them, how they grade their students, applying this. And you've been to China before, you've trained teachers in China before. So you also want to know from your own experience in China here, how do you think this would be applicable? Because schooling and working in China personally, like the educational environment here is totally different. In a classroom, you may have about 70 or 60 students, all right? In Finland, maybe 10 or 15 students. So comparatively, we have larger classes here. And application of this might be a little bit problematic, but based on your experience, I've been in China before and as an expert, I hope you can help us to understand this. But I have thousands of questions. I'll reserve mine and go to my students. And also online, if you have any question, please feel free to ask, drop in a chat box, or if you want to unmute your microphone, you are free to do so. Unmute your microphone and ask Tom your questions. So here, we start from offline. Do you have any question to ask Tom based on what he has presented? He was supposed to talk about STEAM teaching, but if you have questions on STEAM teaching, you can bring it in. That would be an opportunity for him to, chip in what he prepared on that. If you have questions on critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills, evaluation system, anything you want to know, ask your question. So it's time for you, audience. Any question?
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. And thank you, Professor. And I have one question about the question and the system aspect. That is, we know that since the Finnish students do not have as much test pressure as Chinese students, then what is the motivation of Finnish students to study? I mean, what is the key point to making the Finland's education system the best in the world? Thank you.
I think that the key is that, like I showed on that one slide, they put society and how you can contribute to society at the center of everything. So the motivation to study is not extrinsic. It's not outside of you based on exams. It's inside of you. You want to learn because you enjoy it. It's something that, you strive to do. And most Finns really do enjoy learning. The US is also a very test-heavy system, and the dropout rate and how schools are viewed is very different than in Finland because of that. Here, I'll ask my daughters when they come home from school, how was your day? And they can always tell me something they learned, and they're so excited about it. It's just totally different than if you ask somebody. I've got a friend in the US who's got kids the same age, and he says that maybe 2 times in a month they tell them something positive about school, whereas I'm getting things every day that are positive. Of course, there's negative. These boys talk too much. This was boring. Which is normal, and that's okay. That's part of growing and things like that. But here it's very intrinsic. You learn to love learning.
Yes, I get it. Thank you. Yeah, I got only one question.
All right, thank you, Philip, for such an intelligent question. All right, any other questions?
Hello.
Okay. Oh, okay, someone has a question here. All right, yeah, please, you can ask your question.
Okay, Frank, this is Max.
Max is one of my students, so yeah.
This is one question from Wei Ying. And how many teachers co-teach as a team for the Honey project? And how do we assess students' performance? Thank you.
The Honey project started with a principal and then 1 4th class teacher. And then from there, other teachers became involved. There were 4 teachers at the school involved, but only 1 classroom teacher. the French teacher, the main French teacher got involved, the Finnish language teacher got involved, and then the, well, just a minute, I need to translate to English. The home economics teacher got involved, as well as the the environmental studies teacher got involved as well. And then they brought in a whole bunch of experts. They had a marketing, the head of a marketing firm come in to give a presentation and talk with them about how to market for the posters. They had beekeepers come in. So they, it was a very large project, and it encompassed a lot of time and effort, but the students were totally invested in it, and they learned so many things across so many different disciplines.
Okay, thank you. And this is a question from Yi Zhao. How to design a project-based learning program step by step? Thank you.
So if you're going to do it the more traditional way, think of a trigger. A very common trigger or something to get them excited in Finland, since there's forests all over the place, is take a walk in the forest. I once taught at a school where there was forest all around us, and this was with first class students. And we took a walk in the forest, and the groups formed naturally. There was a group that wanted to learn more about all the mushrooms they were seeing. There was a group that wanted to learn more about the birds they were seeing. There was a group that wanted to learn more about the trees. There was a group that wanted to learn more about different soils and temperatures and things like that. So I had 6 or 7 groups after a 20-minute walk. We went back. I had kind of planned some of those groups with what wasn't there. We got more materials, and the groups formed. You don't form the groups in a phenomena-based learning or PBL. They form themselves based on their interest. And that's another reason why students are very highly motivated within these units and within these lessons, is they're following their own interests.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Max. So, Max, do you have any other question over there?
Yes, there are other questions in the chat box.
Okay, we will come to the chat box just a minute. So, any question here in the room? All right, Lydia.
Hi, very nice to meet you, Professor. So in this semester, Dr. Love has introduced us with many pedagogies, such as the PBL and the PHBL. And our group thinks that such pedagogies is very time consuming, and it takes much time for the teachers to prepare. So we want to ask you, how can we improve our efficiency in preparation? Thank you.
Actually, once you start doing PBL, you find that it takes actually less time. And the key is having a very good trigger. Having a good trigger, having books handy. I prefer to use books rather than websites a lot of times, because if they use the books, they're also enhancing their reading skills a bit differently, since most things are online books now. And those experts, basically the teacher's job is having some materials available, trying to predict how it's going to go, getting experts lined up, and basically that trigger, and getting other teachers to buy into it. And in Finland, that's not real hard. And the fact that one of the goals is to produce good workers, businesses are more than willing to help out in almost all cases.
Okay, thank you very much. So I get it. We have to make use of all kinds of sources we have access to. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Lydia. Another intelligent question over there. Okay, next question from Helen. All right. All right.
Good evening, Professor. I wonder, with the spread of COVID-19 across the world, the global economic has suffered a severe setback, and the situation of economic stagnation or even regression is particularly obviously in many countries. Does this mean that the financial support for education in Finland has become unstable? Do changes in government revenues affect the proportion of funds invested in Finland's education system, and therefore the effectiveness of Finnish education?
That's a really good question. But in Finland, education is so highly valued that it's something that they really try to keep very stable. It's, of course, with the economic downturn and everything, there's not going to be as much funding. But when teachers are used to working together, students are used to working together, and class sizes here are around 25. It really helps having that team learning atmosphere and attitude across the whole country. Because if let's say you're a classroom teacher, you're never alone. If you need something, boom, it's really easy to ask others to help you, and it's expected. So in that way, it has hurt, but the way the Finnish system is, it's fairly well prepared for upturns and downturns. And then the fact that businesses are so willing to go into schools because they know that the future is in those schools, no matter what level they're at, also really helps, because the schools, the kids that are there, the children that are there, the adults that are there, that's the future of the country. And they feel that it's very good to invest in it. The Prime Minister, for example, was at one of my daughter's schools earlier this year because she's from Tampere, and she went in and she didn't have the whole school come and see her. She went around to almost every single classroom and talked with each class for a while. That was her full day. She answered questions, she talked with them, and I don't know of many countries where that would happen, where it wouldn't just be her talking to everybody, because she didn't want to talk as much as she wanted to listen to them.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you, Helen, for your question. Before any other question, I'll have a question for you, Tom.
Okay.
I know phenomenon-based learning as practiced in Finland. Teachers work together in groups, right? And like they work together on projects you showed us, for example, the B. So my question is, how do you teach individual subjects, for example, math, science, and all these subjects distinctively? Because in my understanding, it feels all the teachers come together and teach at once. Is that how it is done? Or each teacher teach their subjects separately, and then they give students a phenomenon to work on? How is it done?
So it can be done either way. Let's say if it is done separately, then for example, in the French, like the B project, for example, the main French teacher wasn't involved within the classroom when they were doing, when the classroom teacher was doing certain things. What the main French teacher would do is she was doing more the higher level vocabulary that they would need in French. So it's more the teachers are getting together to plan it. And then it's like, okay, I will do this, but they're not separate. It's how does they do their subjects, they can do their subjects, but everything fits together. It's like the slide you showed at the beginning. They're layering their bricks to build the house or the building. So they're layering their bricks to build this unit, and they overlap they intertwine. So there's nobody on an island. And the students notice that too. They'll be like, oh, yeah, we learned this in French class, and the word for, like they're in a Finnish class, like my youngest daughter. Oh, the word for this in French is this. And then the ones that are taking Spanish, well, we learned about it in Spanish, and this is what it would be in Spanish. So they're building this thing in multiple languages. And maybe like the woodworking teacher has them doing something, you know, maybe they're building a beehive or a birdhouse or something. Well, that dovetails into the forestry. Or here, a lot of times they're making bat houses, you know, so the bats have a place to safely be during the day. And so it's all working together, but you can work separately, but you're planning together to make sure that everything fits its place, you know, almost like putting a puzzle together.
Okay, so in my understanding, you have like on your timetable, you have time for, say, mathematics, you have time for English, you have time for biology, for chemistry, you have time for each individual subject, and you have separate time for students to work on a phenomenon where all these teachers will come together to help students work on these projects.
Or during those lessons, they might be working on their PBL during those lessons.
Okay.
As well,
integrated.
Because yeah, it's a very integrated approach, because in Finland, they see subjects separate, but they more see how they integrate and how you can be doing more than one thing at a time. And I think that's a really important approach to take to it, because there's not one subject that is totally separate from any other. They all go together in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. So last question on that before others come in. How do you train teachers to have this collaborative mindset to work together in such an environment based on a project or phenomenon?
Well, the teachers that have got their teacher education within the last 10 years, that's all they know. That's how they grew up. The older teachers that have been hired in, you know, for more than 10 years, they buy into it because they see that it works. You know, when they were doing everything more separate, they were frustrated. They didn't have time for this and this and this. Well, now they do have the time for everything. They're working together. You know, it's most classrooms in Finland, they don't close the door. The door is open. You know, you're free to go in. And I think that an easy way to think of this is almost from the top down. There was a group from the United States here, and I took them to a middle school here in Tampere, and a group of middle school students gave the tour. No teacher supervision. In the US, it would be illegal. Here, it's normal. And when they got to the director's of the school's office, his door was open. And one of them poked his head in and said, do you have time for a minute? They have some questions that I think would be best for you to answer. And he said, sure. And he came out. And the leader of the group of students from the University of Wyoming, the first question he asked is, how do you do teacher evaluation? And he said, I do it by example. It's kind of how I hope they evaluate some of the students' projects and things like that. The first thing I ask them is, what can I do as the director to help you and make you a better teacher so you can do your job better? Very different approach. Very different approach. And when you're doing PBL, it's kind of the same approach you take with your students. You know, what do you need for me to do? Who is there a certain person you need to talk to? Well, we would like to talk to an architect. Okay. Depending on the age of the student, you know, you could say, well, here's a couple numbers to call. They've helped me in the past. If you call them, I bet they would help you. Like with high school students, they set up the Zoom calls. They set up the visits. Why? It's part of that becoming work ready. And they do the same thing at the vocational level, same thing at the university level. So, but when they're younger, the teacher is doing most of that legwork, unless a student says, my dad's an architect. I wonder if he would come in. I can call him. And that happens a lot during a TBL unit, where the students have a parent they think could help. And it might not even be their group that they're coming in to help. It could be another one. But they're just so happy to be able to contribute to that group and then the group as a whole. Because a lot of times when an expert comes in for one group, they end up going and checking every other group, because then they get interested. They suddenly get invested in this project as well. And a lot of times they'll ask the teacher, well, when can I come back? So it's, as the teacher, you're not doing it alone, even, as far as the experts go. And the students can be very, very good, in finding experts, no matter what their age, but how they do it's very different.
Okay, thank you for that. So in our understanding, your classrooms are open to the public for experts. As far as, they have knowledge in whatever they do, they can walk in to guide students work on projects. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Any other question?
And the expert's job isn't to answer questions as much as it is to ask questions of the students and help them find the answers. So even though they're the experts, they don't regurgitate the information. They help the students to find it.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Are you learning something? If you're learning something, say I. Good. Any other question?
There's a really good one.
Hello, Frank. Hello, Frank.
Okay.
I have a questions.
Okay, great. Jason.
Yeah. Hello, Professor. It's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you for your sharing. And we know that STEAM teaching or PBL is good for the Finnish students. And Finnish students get good grades in PISA testing. But we say, education is something for lifelong. And PISA only assess the students at their age of 15. And so I want to know how the STEAM teaching or PBL teaching will affect the students in their future, or in their futures working or in their future lives. And I also want to know what's the difference between the students who accept the STEAM teaching between the students who didn't accept the STEAM teaching or PBL teaching. That's all about my questions.
I think that the first part is they learn how to work in a team. They learn to ask for help when they need it. And that's a human weakness, is asking for help when you need it. It's something we've all had to overcome in our lives. And some of us, we still have trouble doing it. And they learn that it's okay. And working in that team is so important, because when they go to that working life and for the rest of their life, they have to be able to work in a team to succeed. And as far as accepting the STEAM teaching and the PBL teaching, they get it so often. It just becomes a part of their mindset and a part of their schooling. And most of them do accept it. And the ones that don't accept it as much, they end up having a lot more issues and troubles with school, because team learning is such a huge, huge part of the education system in Finland. And that's at all levels. But they learn how to do it enough to get employment. And there's a student that I had that I taught him in preschool, first class and second class. And he fought everything. And I reconnected with him now, and he's 30 years old. And he's working as a nurse in a group home with mentally disadvantaged adults. And he says that a lot of the things he does with them is trying to get them to become more of a team, because none of them have the mental capabilities to do a lot of things on their own, but they've learned if they work with 2, 3 other people, they can do almost anything, because they all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. So he learned about it once he got to the working life more so. He started applying those, and then he contacted me and he's like, I understand what you've been telling me for a long time now. He goes, wow, if I would have paid attention, I think I would be better at my job. And my response was, no, you wouldn't, because you learned it in your way, and now you're applying it in the most meaningful way for you. And that's the thing. Not everybody has the same path to their learning and their enlightenment of education. And that's important to remember as well, both for educators and students.
And thank you for your answer. Thank you for your answer.
All right, thank you, Jason. Are you satisfied, or you have further questions? If you do, you can come back later. Any other question? Yeah, I saw Zero. All right, Zero, can you please? Yeah, her name is 00. Good, wonderful name.
Okay. Hello, Professor. Good evening. And my question is about reading the literature. And we learned that Finnish educational and evaluation focus on students' individual development, and that there are a few standard tests, especially in the basic education. So this type of evaluation must pose a greater challenge to the teachers. Like you say, it is really different challenge. So we want to know that how the teachers can improve their ability to evaluate the students in the process of teacher professional development in Finland. Thank you. This is my question.
Okay, so you wanted to know, let me make sure I understood it. The teacher evaluation for teachers, or teachers evaluating students?
Teacher evaluation students.
Okay, good. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood it perfectly. That's all. So they take a very different approach, because they believe it's more than just the traditional type of exam. Because if you just go with that traditional type of exam, they're not working in teams, they're not learning from each other, and they're more on an island by themselves. They do have individual exams still, so, and that's from first class up, but they also have many, many more group things, projects, and things like that, because if they learn how to work as a group, it enhances their own learning and their own understanding. And it's been found here that they perform better when they have those individual assessments. So they're able to apply the knowledge much, much better and in a greater capacity than if they were just doing it on their own the whole way through.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Zero, for your question. So I have a follow-up question to what Zero just asked. Because she asked, let me just drop it now. So I know in Finland you have the qualitative and the quantitative form of evaluation. So how do teachers decide which student to promote to the next grade using the qualitative evaluation? So the qualitative is simply, okay, you tell us, I'm not going to say what it means, but so how do teachers promote students from one grade to the other using a qualitative evaluation?
They don't just do one style. They don't ever look at, okay, just the qualitative or just the quantitative. They look at the whole picture. And the reason they look at the whole picture is it's a more true evaluation of the student as a whole. And in Finland, like in a primary school, for example, it's very common to have the same teacher for first class, second class, and third class, or even from first class all the way to sixth class. So in that way, they don't really not promote a lot of times, because they say, well, this person, they started here and they got to here. They were in first class. Have they mastered everything in first class? No, not yet. They're going to be with that same teacher who knows their strengths, who knows their weaknesses, and who they think is going to be able to help them the best. So usually they promote them anyway, and they're with that same group of peers who knows them and understands them as well. And they believe that it enhances the ability for students to try to catch up. Yes, there is still special education here. Yes, there are still special education teachers who do work with students. And that's, some people think that there's no special education in Finland. That's untrue. They think that there's no homework in Finland. That's also untrue. My children have homework almost every day. But it's just their approach is very different. They're looking more at the child in a holistic manner of testing than just one style of testing. I hope that makes sense, because they don't really separate it. So it's a really difficult question to ask and answer.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So those who are asking what is the qualitative and the quantitative, could you please use 1 minute to tell us the meaning of these two? Because I think some are still confused about that. The quantitative evaluation system and the qualitative evaluation system.
Yeah. So if you think of quantifying, numbers, you can quantify them. Okay. So if you give an exam, you're going to get a score on it. And here they grade from 4. Let's go from the 4th grade up, from a 4 to a 10, 10 being the highest. And basically you can think of 6 as passing. And, you can kind of think of those as like percentages. So 6 would be 60%, 70%, and whatever. Very few students get a 10. And that is okay. A 10 should be hard to get. But all students can place somewhere on that in an exam. If you get below 40%, so you have a 4, it means you have a lot of work to do, and you can do tests again in Finland. Like at the university level, for example, you fail a test, it's Finnish law, you have at least 2 more chances to try that exam. Why? Because they believe that if you don't succeed, try it again. Now, is the test exactly the same? No. It's similar. It covers the same material. But in that first exam, if you fail, they're giving you the opportunity to go back and study and apply yourself. And that's something that when the double degree students from Jinan came, they didn't understand that. And then all of a sudden, a few of them failed an exam. And we looked at it, and they didn't fail it because they didn't have the knowledge. They failed it because they didn't have the English vocabulary to understand what the test was asking them. And sometimes that can happen. It doesn't, a failed test doesn't mean that it was necessarily your failure not to be able to do the exam to a passing mark. It could just be you didn't understand what the test was asking you to do. Because there are some tests, when they're created, they're just bad tests. And so they do have the tests where they're quantifying things, but then they also have the more qualitative where it's more observational. It's, how did you do in this meeting with experts? Because that's important. How did you do working with peers and with groups? And you might have a scale from 1 to 5 on that, but it's going to be a rubric, and basing like a percentage test, and that it's very different, because one of them is very subjective and the other is very objective. And they look at it more as subjective assessment and objective assessment is more how they look at it here. Sure, it's quantitative and qualitative. But if you think of subjective and objective, it kind of helps understand that Finnish system a bit better.
So if a student does not perform very well in a quantitative assessment and performs well in a qualitative assessment, does his or her performance in a qualitative pushes him or her up a little bit?
Of course, yeah. They work hand in hand. You know, it's like left hand, right hand. They're working together all the time.
They complement each other.
Yes, you know, it's like tightrope walkers that have their arms out. If they just put one arm out, their balance is off. Whereas if they put both, they help balance each other. And that's kind of how they look at the assessments here. They're there to balance one another, to help each other, to enhance each other.
Wow, that's great. Good. Understood? All right, any question? Okay, I'll go to Tim first, then Owen.
Good evening, Professor.
This one here.
Okay. Good evening, Professor Tom. I'm Tim. Thank you for your introduction about PHBL, and we know that the problems and the phenomena in PHBL are important. So I want to know that how to make sure the effectiveness of the problem or the phenomena mentioned by the teacher or the student, and that is my question. Thank you.
Okay, I was at one PBL workshop in outside of Beijing, and the goal for the 4-hour workshop was for these group of teachers. They had to work across their disciplines, so they couldn't be teaching the same exact thing, and they had to come up with an idea for a phenomenon and develop a little. And the cooks at the school had recently changed. And one person said the students were really complaining about eggs and how they weren't cooked the same, and they weren't as delicious, and they weren't as good. And so they came up with this idea about looking at the school menu and how it was before and how it was now. And then so I questioned them, okay, you've got to start. What else do you want to learn? What's important? And then they started talking about things the students were saying. Well, these eggs were cooked and they tasted like this. These eggs were tasted and they cooked like this. And then I said, okay, how could the students find out why? And then they came up with the idea, okay, they need to interview the chefs. They need to actually talk with them. How are they making these eggs? What kind of spices are they putting in and doing this? And then one said, well, what about the old ones? And then said, well, I wonder if we could get it to where we could talk with them too. And maybe the students and we would see how they're different. So this just started from the students complaining about the food tasting differently. And for them, that was an important phenomenon because they really liked the food before, and now they really didn't. So that started off very simple, but then later got very complex because then, well, maybe the students would have an opportunity to do some cooking and some experimenting as well. Centered around eggs. What kind of spices could they add where they like it? And maybe find ways that they don't like it, because they're not going to like and dislike exactly the same things. So something that's the biggest thing is it needs to be open-ended without one correct answer. That's the biggest thing about phenomenon-based learning. If there's only one right answer, it's not a good trigger, it's not a good phenomenon. There needs to be multiple answers and multiple ways to get to an answer as well. I hope that helps a little.
Okay, I get it. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Tim. All right. So, Tom, who chooses the phenomena, the teacher or students?
It can go either way. I would say 95% of the time, the teacher sets the trigger. So, you know, what's going to get them interested? Is it a forest walk, or like my background? I live right next to this lake. Go for a walk around the lake. and they're going to see all kinds of different things. Maybe they want to know what kind of fish are in the water, what's the water temperature. There's ducks, there's swans, well, how many variety of birds do they see? There's been logging in certain areas of it. What has that done to the soil and the animal habitat compared to places that haven't been logged? So just something where they would have multiple opportunities to find something of interest. That's the biggest thing. So if it's, but like the bee thing was totally done by students. So the important thing is as the educator is always keep your ears open, because you can hear something and then even you can do the implementation. But you can say, well, I heard a group of students talking and it made me think this would be a great PBL unit for us to explore. But you don't have to give the students credit by name. You can just say, I heard a group of students talking. And by doing that, it plants in their mind, this is student-based. They've bought it because it's not coming from you, it's coming from students, from their peers, from their friends, maybe even from them.
All right, thank you. So because of our time, we do 2 more questions, one here and one online. So Owen, your question.
Okay, hello, Professor. Hello, everyone. We know STEAM curriculum, STEAM, STEAM, STEAM curriculum is also popular. So my question is, what are the features of a high quality STEAM curriculum?
So basically I saw another question in the chat that I'll answer as well in this. And so basically the thing is it should have multiple correct answers. It should be able to be carried out and done through multiple different ways. It should have students working in teams and involved in their learning process from beginning to end. It should give students a chance to be the expert as they're teaching the other STEAM teams about their solution and how they arrived at it. And it's going to involve science, it's going to involve technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And the question that I saw is, why did it go from STEM to STEAM? And the biggest reason is, in the United States, over 50% of arts programs have been cut. So classroom teachers now have that art thing as well, and most of them didn't know what to do. So what they started doing is they changed it from STEM to STEAM, so the arts wouldn't disappear out of the United States schools. And when it says arts, it could be cooking, you could be writing a song, for example. Maybe you're doing this project on the forest or anything. Well, if your team decides, let's write a song about this and talk about different things we've learned or a different aspect of things, that's arts. Maybe you play instruments and you want to create a song where you actually play instruments to it. It doesn't have to have words. So it's multifaceted, that arts part. And, to get back to your question, just incorporating those and looking at it from multiple perspectives to give the students the most benefits possible. And integration is the key and a good trigger. Not one right answer. If there's one right answer, it's not the right way to do it.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Good evening, Professor. Yeah, it's Philip again, and I have been collecting some questions in the chat box. And here's a question from Wei Yin, and that is, if we teach online because of the emergency situation, how do we still have some meaningful online PBL classes?
What you do is you utilize breakout rooms. And I've had to do that as well. You utilize breakout rooms where the team is still together speaking in their own room. And then as the coach, because I wouldn't be, when you're doing PBL or STEAM, you're not really a teacher, you're more like a coach. I will pop into the room. Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Is there anything I can do to help you move forward? So it's more like that. You're in your own little breakout room. And so you're still able to work together in that manner. It's not as nice as being face to face, but you can still do the things you need to do. It's different. I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, we get it, sir. Thank you. Okay.
All right, good. It's going on well, right? We have 10 more minutes. Probably we can do one more question here. All right, yeah, come on here to ask the question. Tom, you're in trouble today. We get over 1,000 questions for you.
That's okay. Well, she's coming up. I'm going to answer one that's in the chat real quick. Is that okay?
Okay, let him ask first, then
okay,
one
that
for
works. Okay.
Okay, hello, Professor. Our team's question is, in China, teachers have been used to the traditional ways of lesson preparation. So I want to ask, I want to ask how do we what do teachers need to pay attention to when preparing for a STEAM class?
The biggest thing that they need to be prepared for is getting themselves a team. You try to predict where your students will go given their trigger. Set up some experts ahead of time if possible. And the thing is, when you're planning it, you're never, ever going to have all the solutions or all the people set up that the students might need. But you really try to be predictive, and you try to collaborate with as many people as possible based upon the trigger, the nature of where you think things will go. It's a very predictive thing. And the more STEAM things you do, the better you get at it. But even the so-called experts, they never have all the right people set up. There's always a bit of scrambling going on. If the students are older, you can turn it back onto them more so and more so. So, there's just, it's a lot of moving parts, and you try to set up, basically you try to have your parking lot with as many spots for the cars to park as possible, but be prepared and able to expand it when needed. That's kind of an analogy that I got from a STEAM workshop in Canada one time, and I really like it. So you prepare, but you adapt as well.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. All right. So Tom, you wanted to respond to your question quickly from the chat box.
Yeah, there's one in here about how to improve the students' writing ability when carrying out a STEAM course. Okay. And reading on the basis of STEAM, so stream. And the biggest thing is, when you're doing things in a team, you tend to do writing in a bit better because your teammates need to be able to read your writing, and your peers being able to understand what you're writing and see what you're writing and read it, depending on your age, is usually much more important than the teacher being able to do it. So if your peers in your team can't understand what you've written, it puts pressure on you to do it. And you're more likely to ask for help from a peer student with your writing than you are from the teacher. Why? It's easier. It's less corrective. So that's really the biggest thing why Finland started utilizing STEAM and PBL and things like that, is students are more willing to ask for help from their age level peers than the adult in the room. And when you put forth that you are all experts, you empower those students to be an expert and to help one another. And that's the biggest thing that, you know, why Finland has improved so much in their education and things like that, is they've really empowered students to be those experts and to help one another.
Great, awesome. So unfortunately, we have to bring our session to an end here. I guess Tom is on a hot seat, but Tom, we're definitely gonna need you again. As Wadin said, we need you in Guangzhou. Hopefully, we're hoping pandemic issues and, you know, China borders will fully be open, right? But until then, thanks to technology, we always drag you, you know, to answer more questions. As you can see from the chat box, we have over, I can't even count, a lot of questions. My students, I mean, I saw they have more questions in their books to ask you. So we're gonna do part 2 of this, and we will touch base on STEAM teaching and forest teaching, critical thinking, and all that. We have a lot to learn, right? You heard that, right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I still have a lot to learn too. I mean, nobody knows everything, and that's the important thing to remember, is I know you and your students could teach me a lot as well as everybody else that's here. You know, that's what's nice about being humans, is we're always all learning from each other.
Right.
We are all experts in something.
Great. Yeah. So before we close, I would like to ask our dean and our vice dean if they have a closing remarks or to give their observation. Okay. So our dean and vice dean are saying thank you so much for your time and, you know, for the discussion and everything. So we will take your last words to close this session briefly. But before we do so, I have to address this. I got one interesting question from my student, and I think you need to take a break. Let me handle this myself. They were asking me a lot of questions that we are paying more attention on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. What about those majoring in humanities, in languages, in those, you know, arts, you know, those humanity programs? Like, no one is talking about them. We've forgotten them. Like, no one is, you know, paying attention to them. And my answer is, yes, they are very important. Those literature, we need them. We need those learning languages and all those. But the STEAM is not just to say we are training students to become engineers or scientists or tech. I mean, yes, that's one aspect. But the other aspect is every one of us need a little bit of engineering, need a little bit of knowledge in technology, a little bit of knowledge in art and mathematics, because these are our daily life, right? We need them in our daily lifestyle. So even though if you go through a STEAM program, you may not become a scientist or an engineer. However, you need to apply the knowledge of science or chemistry when you are cooking, right? You need to apply the knowledge of science and art when you are decorating your room. And even when you are dressing, right? You need to apply art, how to combine colors together. You don't wear yellow jacket, blue shirt, green pants, white shoes. You put on some, you look like a clown, you know? So you need art in your own personal lifestyle. So even though you might not be a famous artist, but you apply art in your own life. So we need to learn this, and it's general. It cuts across all spheres of life. So it's not that schools or countries or nations are relegating literature and the humanities to the background, but we want to inculcate the STEAM, you know, atmosphere in every citizen's life, so that we all become master of our own life. This is what I said. Tom, 20 seconds. Give us your closing remarks. 20 seconds.
I'm going to piggyback off what you said with the arts. In Finland, it's very common by the time you are in vocational school or high school that you've had four to six languages and at least 3 years of each language. And you're learning about the PBL or the STEAM within those language courses as well. So it's going across languages. What does that do? It opens up your research. It opens up access across multiple languages, because not everything's written in Chinese or English or Finnish or Swedish or whatever. It makes you a more well-rounded person. And that's the goal of PBL and STEAM, make you a more well-rounded person.
Good. Everybody, let's put our hands together and clap for Tom. If you enjoyed this seminar, say I. If you want part 2 of this, say I. All right, Tom, we will decide it later. So our Dean, Professor Lee Shenbin, and our Vice Dean, we are grateful for you come to grace this occasion. We thank you for your presence. It has added colors, to this whole seminar. So we have a special gift for you. I will call Olivia to present our gift to you. It's just a small gift to say thank you for coming. Yeah, and also my old friend over here. Yeah. So thank you all, our online audience, for joining, for your time, for your questions. I'm so sorry that we didn't have enough. Okay, so let's let the online audience go over here. Okay. Yeah, Olivia, do it again. The online audience. Yeah, do it again. Okay, no, okay, do it again. All right. Thank you. You helped us a lot. Tom, I was actually planning something small, but our Vice Dean, Wan Lao Shi, helped to make it so great. So we thank you so much, Wan Lao Shi and Professor Lee. Yeah. So thank you, our audience, those joining from the United States, from Europe, from Africa, from other. We have some schools joining in China. Some schools joining in. So one great surprise I have for you all. This class, all the students are going to write research based on phenomenon-based learning, STEAM teaching, critical thinking, creative thinking, and they have already started with their research, collecting data. So Tom has officially agreed to be a reviewer for all your papers to make sure it gets published in English journal. Put your hands together for Tom. So the great thing is, we're going to have a lot of publications from these wonderful students in top English journals, and Tom is going to help us. So I encourage you all, give it your best, okay? Give it your best. You can do it. Say, I can do it. If you will say, I. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for such an awesome program. Have a good night. If you have any further question, feel free to come to me. I'll let it get to Tom. Then we add it to our next program. Thank you all. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, our online audience. Bye-bye.